welcome to the program. I'm Gigi Kopelak. I'm very excited about my guest today. She is Leslee Asch. She is the Executive Director of the National Dance Institute in New York City. Welcome, Leslee. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
So we're really here today, though, to talk about a show that you are curating at the Katonah Museum about contemporary puppet theater.
Right.
So tell me, dance, theater, how does that work?
Well, there are a couple of possible answers to that, but puppetry actually preceded my being at National Dance Institute. But the commonality really is that I care about the arts, and I care about the arts' power to inspire and to transform lives. And National Dance Institute teaches dance in the New York City public schools and uses dance as a catalyst to help kids achieve excellence and really transform their lives. Transformation interests me, and that's largely what the exhibit is about.
For the puppetry exhibit, because you have a feeling that puppetry is really about the emotion that's going on inside. But let's just talk about your background a little bit in puppetry before the dance theater.
Right.
You were with the Henson?
I worked for the Jim Henson Foundation and actually Jim Henson Company for many years. I actually started as a puppet builder, and which was wonderful. And then I did all our museum exhibits, traveling all over the world. And then I was very fortunate to actually work with Jim as his liaison to the puppetry world, which he cared about deeply. And just after his death, actually, we started, well, actually, just prior to his death, we started planning. It was his vision to have a festival of puppet theater that would really bring artists from all over the world, the best in the world, together in New York. And actually, it was a wonderful, amazing meeting with Joseph Papp and Jim Henson and Cheryl Henson and myself, in which we were talking about the concept, and Joe Papp said to Jim, yeah, it's a great idea, so what do we talk about? Let's just do it.
Okay.
And unfortunately, neither of them were around to see that finished, but Cheryl and I actually did see it through. And we did festivals from 1992 to 2000 every 2 years, so there were 5 editions of the festival, which really was putting puppetry on the map to a large extent in New York and
not
part
just
of the New York scene.
Not just for children now, we're talking about, because I hear you call them artists.
Yes.
Here you say they're artists.
Yes,
not
actually it's very important that you say that, because one of the things, we knew that we were planning on doing all adult work and that it was really going to be high-end art and very important artists and have worked with puppetry over the years, and included in this exhibit and included in all of our festivals. But we realized that we actually, when we did the first festival, at first we were going to be really hardline and have nothing for children at all. It was only going to be for adults. And we were getting down to the wire, being ready to do this, and all of a sudden we went, oh, you know, maybe this is a problem. We don't really want 5-year-olds in these shows, so maybe we need to have a part. And actually, in the catalog for that first one, we did a section called Just for Kids at the end. And everybody, when they went through it, it said Just for Kids, and they got to that part of the brochure, and they went, oh, you mean the rest of it isn't? And so it actually worked incredibly well and was very important, because then we were trying to match the right audiences with the right work. It's not to say that work for children isn't important, but it's, you want the right audience in the piece that you're doing.
Yeah, because puppetry's been around for ages and ages and ages, and it wasn't always for children. I think what Herodotus, the Greeks talked about it.
Absolutely.
What is that, 800 BC or something?
Yeah, 5th century BC.
Okay.
So yeah, which is, and it's had a really important tradition. I mean, in many cultures, it was in the province of shamans. It was actually for religious ceremonies.
The Native Americans. Yes.
Native American, particularly interests me in terms of the theme of this show, because in the Native tradition, there are we call them transformation or reveal masks, because the outer form is often an animal, and then when you open it, it's the spirit inside. And that, to me, is a lot of what I'm trying to, the commonality within the show. That was my through line.
That transformation again.
The transformation and the ability of puppetry. One of the things that fascinates me about it is that I don't know any other form that so beautifully makes it possible to give form to the unseen. Emotions, thoughts can all be manifest physically, and you can really get a great sense of what's going on. So it's a very multidimensional form as well as multidisciplinary.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the exhibit then, because it starts, I think, well, the catalog cover has a very famous artist on it.
Yes.
In fact, he's going to be showing at MoMA.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the timing worked out.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this Katonah exhibit for years, and it's actually worked out very interestingly. It's a bit of serendipity that they're both opening the same time. It's William Kentridge, and he has an exhibit opening at the Museum of Modern Art just right around the same time.
But it's not about his puppet work.
No, it's him as a printmaker, and that in particular is because of his work as well. He's doing an opera at the Met, Metropolitan Opera, which opens in March. So he's got a lot on his plate right now.
Really?
What I've included in this exhibition, although in fact all of the other artists in the exhibit are Americans, the starting point for me in terms of what was my through line, because there are lots of different ways. It's a very broad form. There are lots of different paths that you could take to explaining it. I was very certain I didn't want to do a how-to. I didn't want to do kind of a historical overview. But I really wanted to get at this thing that really interests me about seeing internal worlds. And there's a scene in William Kentridge and Handspring Puppet Company of South Africa's production, excuse me, which we presented in 1994. It was the first time his work actually was seen in the U.S. It was first created in 1992, and we presented it at the '94 festival. And there's a scene in it in which Wojciech is setting the table, and he's very methodically putting things and changing them, cleaning them off. And behind him on the screen, the table's going, everything's moving, and it's really the most brilliant depiction I've ever seen of an internal world.
Right, and I think we have to know that Wojciech is the story, it's a very sad story about...
But it's originally by Buchner.
Right.
The play is by Buchner. Right. But it was recast, rather than it being a soldier, it was recast as being, it's called Wojciech on the Highveld, their version. So it is reset in South Africa.
And during apartheid. So exactly. When you say all this chaos is going behind him, there's a lot of things going on.
Correct.
And he's trying to straighten out his whole life.
Exactly.
And this is visually trying to explain this. Again, the transformation that you're talking about. Right. How to visualize all chaos, and unusual for a puppet.
Exactly.
So it's not Miss Piggy.
Exactly. it isn't. Although we'll talk about that later. We will have a place within the exhibit that is the learning center.
I know from your brochure from when you did the other, you want to include children also. But
Correct.
These are very serious artists.
They are, and it was very interesting. Another piece of serendipity. I happened to run into William at Kentridge at the recent Armory print show. And so I had the opportunity to tell him what I was using as a through line. He said, "Yeah, I think it's one of the best things we've ever done." So I was very happy.
So that's
kind of, for me, it's the starting point. So in a way, it's separate. But it's a door into that.
So what will they actually see though at the museum? They won't see the puppet show. They'll see a film of it. Or?
Well, in the case of the Handspring Puppet Company and William Kentridge, they'll actually see video footage of the scene from Wojciech. Okay. They'll also see video footage of a scene from another production, Confessions of Zeno, because along with it, we will have a series of prints that are derived from the Confessions of Zeno. Wojciech, William has a technique where he's erasing, and the animation is drawings and it's erasures as it's going through. Okay. And there are no existing prints from Wojciech, but I wanted to have that part of his life incorporated into it. So we are including prints from Confessions of Zeno.
Okay, which is another
Zeno too. Yeah, exactly.
That's great. And then you have some very famous artists.
Yes.
You have the Lion King lady, Julie Taymor, and what would you be showing with her?
I'm not sure she'd like it if I told her she was the Lion King.
No, I know. I'm sorry. I know.
Pardon me, Julie.
It just came out of me. But
Julie.
I mean, but she certainly is, famous for
absolutely,
absolutely.
And
I don't know that anybody relates to anything else. I mean, there's another thing you're showing here called the transposed heads,
right.
which is It's really an interesting story.
Well, she's had a very interesting career,
Yes,
and certainly
yes,
has
she
done many different things and is known for many different things. She's one of the artists within the exhibition who is very clear. She's not happy if I call her a puppeteer, but she very much uses puppetry as part of her work, and frequently, not always, but frequently is using puppet theater, and often foreshowing those internal worlds. I mean, she actually had a piece which predates The Lion King, which was called Wandarian, which was all about transformation and the animal within. Transposed Heads is wonderful because it's a great story of trying to put one is all body. She has a husband, and I love that one is all physical and wonderful, and the other is all mental.
She's in love with two people.
She gets to think, what if I could put the two together?
Take the head from one, who's an
Exactly.
intellectual, and the body of the other one, who's all physical, and put them together.
And with puppetry, it actually
you can
happens.
do it.
So there you go. But the figure that will actually be in the exhibit is actually a puppet called, he's the guru within who's trying to sort this out for her.
Oh, okay.
And his name's Kamadamana. I think I'm
In the
pronouncing it
transposed
right.
head story.
In the transposed head
story, yeah.
Exactly.
And what about, I know in the catalog you have a sketch from The Lion King.
Yes.
So you're going to have this on the walls? or
No,
something?
that one we won't. That was really in the catalog. There are a couple
Okay.
of things that are just in the catalog, really as background, more information as people are going
Right.
into it. The Native American mask is not really in the exhibit. I have in the catalog, I talk about some of the artists over time who've been interested in puppetry, because it's not the first time that there's a renaissance, if you will, of puppetry, but it's certainly an important one now. But there was a time, certainly in the 20s, that a lot of artists were involved with it, and I specifically talk about Alexandra Exter, who is a Russian constructivist artist, who I just think her marionettes were amazing, and people don't know that she was involved with it. Paul Klee. It's had a broad
But her art
appeal.
was the marionettes?
Her art was also theater sets and,
Oh, okay.
and theaters, but
Right.
she was involved with puppetry. And
I want
certainly-
to give a special commendation to you about the catalog, because it
Oh,
really is a
thank
fabulous
you.
catalog. I
Thank
mean, I
you.
learned so much, and I just was so interested. I got onto the internet and I
Yay.
looked all this stuff up, and I think
Well,
I hope
good.
everybody gets to see the show, because it's just really interesting. And I want to talk a little bit about the different. You include a lot of different kinds of puppet theater,
Right.
because it's not just puppets. There's, for instance, this one. Is it Hannah Tierney?
Mm-hmm.
Where there's no people in it.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Hannah's work is very abstract, and actually, she's one of the artists who's really been pushing that aspect of the form. And occasionally, her work is representational, but not usually. And what's intriguing also about her work, I mean, the particular story that we're doing, it's how Wang Fo was saved, and I thought it was really very appropriate for an art museum, because it's about a painter who, in fact, the story is that. The painter has angered the king because the king says that he has distorted his vision forever, and he's really angry, and he wants him put to death because he has deceived him. He's made him think that the world is as beautiful as his paintings, and it's a very powerful message. And in fact, as it goes through, the story unfolds. Wang Fo actually escapes by going into one of his paintings. He paints a lake, paints a boat, and goes off into it. So it's just kind of wonderful.
Yeah.
But Hannah's work is unique in the form as well as what she's what she's trying to say with it. She has a particular system, it's a counterweight system, so that she's built a grid above the ceiling, and on the side she's pulling the strings that are manipulating each of the puppets.
Okay. But they're not puppets. There's pieces of fabric. And
Well, puppet, I go back and forth. They're
Okay.
not puppets in the traditional sense.
Okay.
Technically, a puppet is just an inanimate object moved through human effort. So to me, lots of things are puppets.
that's so interesting.
And I've taken. With the festivals we did it, and with this exhibit I'm doing it, really trying to understand the broadest form. And I love people being confused. I love that somebody will say, I don't think that's a puppet. Is that really a puppet? Why is that a puppet?
Because the
That excites
derivation
me.
of the word puppet means something, doesn't mean an inanimate object. I think, doesn't it mean eye or
Well,
something?
the thought is that it's derived from the word pupa, which is actually little doll, but also has to do with the pupil. And so it's a way, I posit that it's a way of seeing the world. So that's kind of the direction I had taken.
So I like that,
Yeah.
so that you don't think of it as a person or some little dog, but you think of it as seeing, like you say, transforming.
Right.
That word. We'll carry that word all the way through this.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and then I think one that Liz Goldberg, I think, is interesting because to me, when you're saying that people don't think of it, I couldn't figure out why, because this looks like animation to me, or am I?
It is animation.
It is animation.
But the reason that she's included, it's great. I mean, again, it's always to me interesting to have an exception. Rules are more interesting when there are lots of exceptions.
Throw something in to confuse everybody.
I think Liz is actually the one that I put in, which probably stretches it the farthest.
Okay.
But what, for me, her work as a painter, and actually a painter and an animator, her work as a painter, she's very focused on the diva, which is really her means for starting to understand external and internal realities, and she does that with a lot of for me, interest. She also, even within the animation, she really manipulates line in the way that other people would manipulate a figure.
Okay.
So she really is, it's a very free line drawings that then have colors put on them. And to me, yes, it's a little bit of a stretch, but to me it's a very interesting other way of saying, and her work is, she will say, and it is true, her work is very inspired by puppet theater.
Okay.
And so she has actually, her whole form of working has been inspired by the puppet and by puppet theater.
Okay. That's it. Yeah, it's interesting. So you will see a film there of this.
Yes, you're actually, that's the other place where the two, both with William Kentridge and Handspring and with Liz Goldberg, what you're seeing is actually paintings and video.
Okay.
For all of the other artists, well, actually, in the Learning Center, I don't mean in the Learning Center, sorry, there's a project gallery which actually will have films.
There are actually 4 separate rooms up at the
Correct.
Katonah Museum, and you'll have 2 great big rooms and then a 3rd room.
Which is the project gallery, which will have films in it.
Okay.
There'll be 3 films, 3 animated shorts that actually are puppet films.
Okay.
And the puppets from those films will be on display
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
In the 2 main galleries, you're right, in the 2 main galleries, the starting point for this, again, just as far as what I wanted people to see, is it's very important to me that puppetry is a form of theater, and that it's very important to get a sense of how they relate. It's not just to have objects that are there. I really wanted to make sure as much as possible that you're actually getting a tableau, you're actually getting a sense of a scene. So there will be video in each of the galleries that shows excerpts from the pieces, but within the tableaus, you will get a sense of an actual scene. And during the course of the time of the exhibit, there will be times where artists will come and actually do excerpts of their work. I thought that was really important. At one point I wanted to have everything spring to life. I wanted everything to be in tableau and the whole show would happen, and it got a little unwieldy. So this is what we've come up with, and I think it works really well.
So it's mostly Sundays. On Sunday they're mostly...
Yes, and in fact the opening Sunday, which is the 28th of February, Janie Geyser will be here from California. She actually teaches at Cal Arts.
Okay.
And she'll be here to do excerpts from her piece, Evidence of Floods, which will be really great. And the way that the museums decided to do it, I think, is wonderful. There will be Sunday docent tours at 2:30, and like you, the docents have been boning up, and they're going to have all kinds of things to tell people, which I think is going to be great.
No, they have a great docent program there.
It's terrific. I'm very impressed. I'm actually very impressed with the whole museum. It's been a delight to work with them.
But it's interesting you mentioned Janie Geyser now, because that's an interesting story too. She's a woman who leaves her husband, and then she's hired to find herself or something.
Exactly.
So I'm anxious to get up and see how she does that with the puppet.
Well, and the form that she uses is very interesting, because it's really, they're tiny vignettes. It's actually a form of toy theater. And so each of them are little stages, and in the exhibit you'll see 2 of the stages. The show was done with a series of 8 stages that people actually walked from one to the other.
Oh, okay.
And in the exhibit, we'll have two of those eight,
Yeah.
so you'll get a sense of how that's
Yeah,
manipulated.
explain this one also. I know well, let's just say there are puppets where people are inside. That's Ralph Lee.
Right.
So the people are manipulating, right? And so how will you show those?
Well, actually, Ralph Lee's work in Meadowy River Theater, they will actually have, in one of the galleries, it will be like a little parade in the center. So there'll be full figures.
Okay.
You'll get to see the whole thing. The people won't be standing there wearing them, but we will have. There'll be mannequins that are there in their stead. But it's kind of fun because Ralph was actually the originator of the Halloween parade in Greenwich Village. So it's kind of fun that we were able to put it in a form within the exhibit where it really does feel kind of parade-like.
That's great.
Which will be fun. But that is showing, as you said, a different aspect. And those are really full body and mask, although some of them are constructions. He does a lot with found objects. So the people
that
will
would be
see.
there too.
Yeah.
And then there's this, is it Dan Hurlin? And he's if you saw him working, he would be there with the puppet behind.
Well, one of the days you'll be able to.
Okay, great.
Actually, in this case, he's not performing. He has a number of other people that are performing. He's the director of this. He does sometimes he's performing as well. In this case, he's
But that's
the
another
director.
form of how puppets work.
Right. That's actually, yes, his technique there is based on, it's a derivation of the bunraku style of puppet theater.
From
which
the
is really
17th century or something like that in Japan.
Yes, which continues to this day, of course. But there's an American style of bunraku, which is really not strictly bunraku, but where the puppet is actually manipulated directly by the hands of the performer, and several of the artists.
But when they do that, do they take on the expressions of anything, or they just really, or
not usually?
No.
It really actually depends. It's interesting you ask that question because my answer normally would be no. I mean, pretty quickly would be no. They're supposed to they blend into the background. In fact, in traditional bunraku, they wear the assistants wear a hood, and then the face of the head puppeteer is often visible.
Okay.
But traditionally, it's meant to blend away so that you're not aware of it. In the Mabou Mines piece that we're going to have, Peter and Wendy, they're actually wearing all white because the set is all white, so they're not shedding away in black. But in the case of one of the artists within it, Roman Pasca, it's also using bunraku style, but he very much, the performers are part. They are part of the piece.
So
they're actually, in this case, called the puppet walkers. Okay. He's got a puppet walker, and then Bill Irwin, the famous actor and clown, is the puppet talker on screen within it, which is kind of wonderful.
So it's so amazing that you've managed to get also these different kinds of puppetry in this theater. It's terrific. And you mentioned which one did you say? Oh, Mabou Mines. Is that the name of the? That's not a person's name.
No, it's the name of a company, and they've been around for a long time. I actually. They were doing work with puppetry in the 70s at the Public Theater. Lee Brewer is the probably most well-known of the artists within it, and he's certainly, along with Julie, two of the MacArthur geniuses within this, which is great. A very illustrious group of artists. But Mabou Mines is a theater company, experimental theater company, that doesn't always use puppetry, but often has used puppetry. The piece that we're showing in the exhibit is actually Peter and Wendy. It's an adaptation of Barry's classic Peter and Wendy, and
Peter Pan.
Right, exactly.
But in this case, they're using ironing boards or something.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The conceit here, I mean, the basic premise that they're using as a starting point is that they never left the nursery. That it's all taking place within the confines of the nursery.
Oh, that's great.
So bed sheets become the sails, and ironing boards become the planks that they're walking. The battle that you'll see in the exhibit is on a toy chest. So that's the Marooner's Island is a toy chest.
That's great.
Which is wonderful. And it's because they're getting at a different level of the story. They're actually really very interested in in the internal world of that story, in which it really is, it's a thought of as a children's story, but in the way that they're looking at it, it's really about the loss of childhood. It's about coming to terms with
and the way you
life.
describe it, maybe it was all fantasy anyway. It was when it all happened in the bedroom.
Maybe. Maybe. I like to ask questions. I don't necessarily have all the answers,
Right.
but I like to ask questions.
Well, think about it. Just
exactly.
have that discussion about it. What does it
Exactly.
mean? I love that. And so we're coming towards the end. I just want to discuss, there are 3 more films of artists that you're going to show. Is those the ones you're talking about in the 3rd gallery, in the
Yes,
project
in
gallery?
the project gallery.
Okay.
And what I thought was interesting about those also is that Jim Henson's youngest daughter, Heather Henson, has actually taken it on herself. She is doing performing in her own right, but she's also producing animation films, puppet animation films.
Okay.
And these 3 are ones that were created by her company, Ibex Puppetry.
Okay.
And I really very much wanted to include that, include what she was doing, and also include that aspect of the work. I think it's really important to see, because some of the most experimental work is happening in that area. And as you can see, what interests me is artists experimenting with this form. And I'm hoping, I was very encouraged to hear that you're excited doing your research, because the hope is that people come away from this. It's not going to be, oh, now I understand a different thing about puppetry. It's not just children, it's just adults.
Right.
But I don't want it to be, then this is the definitive. You know, the reality is it's a very broad form. It's attracted many artists from many disciplines, and hopefully will continue to.
Well, it really interested me, and I hope that everybody gets to see the show. I just want to include these little guys that you brought here
Right.
that are going to be in the Learning Center, which is the 4th room of the museum. And this will be, the Learning Center is for children, really, to come and experience the transformation.
Well, and actually what we want to make sure is that they can also make connections, so that they can see this is much more. When somebody thinks of a hand puppet, this is a classic hand puppet. We'll have forms that are a classic rod puppet, a classic marionette, and then the docents and the Learning Center people will actually work with them to say, well, what's the extrapolation from that? Can you find that aspect in the artist's work in the main galleries? So we think it's a point of entry for children to be able to really understand and appreciate what the artists have done.
Okay, February 28th it opens.
It does.
And it's there until
June 13th.
June. It's a nice long show.
Right.
And so I hope everyone gets a chance to see it. It sounds fascinating. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Thank you so
very
much, Leslie, for coming. This was so interesting.
Gigi. That's great. Thank you.
And thank you for watching.